Catholicsplaining. Prepare yourself. You're about to be Catholicsplained. What are we Catholicsplaining today? Why, it is the last days of St. Thomas More, more specifically his martyrdom. Today is the anniversary of his death. And the actual feast day that he shares with St. John Fisher is June 22nd. So we've already celebrated that in the liturgical calendar. That's the date that St. John Fisher was executed. I think it's good to note that every single bishop betrayed except for him. So if we ever feel a little bit discouraged, well, maybe feel a little better about the situation we have in the church in America today. But this is definitely someone that we need to study. The Pope canonized both of them together in the 1930s for reasons in the 1930s, and you can even see it there. And this is something that we definitely need today. What's very important about St. Thomas More is he was ahead of his time. A lot of people try to say, oh, he was so old-fashioned this way, or, he wasn't perfect and all that. Remember, if you're a saint, doesn't mean you're sinless. Okay, it means that you have attained the crown. We all have faults. And he, by using as his defense his conscience and his silence, the law, it was something that has resonated 500 years later. Okay, it's very important. Well, look who it is. Hi, it's me, Tater from Ireland. I changed my name. Oh, okay. You are the Man Cave Inc. Well, thanks for letting me know, because I would have gone, who is this person? Yes. So today is the anniversary of the death of St. Thomas More, the execution of him. And we all know how this reverberated in Ireland, and definitely. But also in America. I did work on how the effect of what happened in England, how it contributed to the outlook and the vision of America as not having a state church. There were specifically how it worked with Maryland and all that, but that's something for another day. We're here looking at St. Thomas More and his final martyrdom. We need prayers always, definitely. Yes, pray for Ireland, everybody. Pray to Our Lady of Knock, our Queen of Peace. Indeed. All right, so yeah, it's a very exciting time right now with the World Cup happening. Norway yesterday was pretty amazing, and America playing tonight. So we'll see what's going on. It's kind of bringing the world together, and the universal church brings us all together as well. Like if I go to Ireland, I decide to go to mass. Even if I go to mass in Irish, which I always try to find a mass in Irish when I'm over there, it's the same mass that we're saying here. We're all uniting together. If you're in Rome, France, I've been to France. I've been there in French. I've been to mass, of course, in Spanish. I've been to the traditional Latin mass according to the 1962 Missal, which of course is different, but it's still united to everything. So yes, it is very nice to be part of this church and this man who died for the church. It's just very interesting that they went and found the one thing he could not comply with. That is why today, the situation you see in the United States, it happened under the president from 2008, and there has been concerns about the way a president from 2016 and 2024 has been behaving. And I think that looking at St. Thomas More, we can say why. That even if maybe you don't necessarily like the Pope, you don't like the man, maybe you don't agree with everything that he says. And, St. Thomas More was living, remember, he was living during some interesting popes. Let's put it to you that way. But when you look at the institution of the papacy, when you look at the institution of the successor to St. Peter, it's when you attack that we get concerned. Did you see the SSPX has been excommunicated? I did indeed. I have been following that. I have not been reporting on it because I'm a little bit ignorant. I'll just lay it out. Did they deserve to get excommunicated? Absolutely. Absolutely. It was a schismatic act. Should we go back to the attitude and permissions from Benedict XVI? Also, absolutely. Absolutely. But no matter how justified you might feel about something, you do not sunder yourself from the church. And when the Pope himself gives you a warning, you listen. I'm really hoping that Leo will be gradually, not suddenly, because he's a very prudent man. I've been following him for a while. Will undo a lot of the damage that sadly Pope Francis did. I know a lot of priests, a lot of faithful Catholics. Again, what did we do? There was no sin in us. What did we do? And of course, I'm very devoted to the Latin Mass. I'm very devoted to the Missal of 1962. What did we do? We loved Jesus. We loved the Mass. Priests and nuns were popping out like popcorn in a popcorn machine. No sin was in us. Okay, sin was in us personally, but you know what I mean. There was no sin in loving the church. It was very unkind, to be gentle, what happened. But the SSPX, I'm sorry, you consecrated those bishops, you pay the price. It's good to see you. It's good to see you too. All right, well, let's look at St. Thomas More. And maybe St. Thomas More can tell us a little bit about that. You don't sunder yourself from Peter. In the case of Henry VIII, he was Catholic, if you will, to the day he died, in doctrine and practice, but he wanted his own way. And he didn't like being told no. It's very hard to be told no. In his case, it was adultery. So it's like, dude, you kind of had it coming. But there are cases where, yes, it is hard. It is hard. But we must stay faithful. That's part of what it means to be Catholic. We're faithful to Jesus. To Tolkien. J.R. Tolkien said, if he were to leave the church, it would be to call Jesus a liar to his face. He was very hardcore. A lot of people try to forget that, but that's who he was. All right, Pope Francis, yeah. When they believe where they pray, they can take over our own. Yeah, it was done out of, what do you call it, misguided compassion. That's what Mother Angelica used to call it. It's like, oh, well, they're there, they're doing work, allow them to pray in this small room. It wasn't necessarily a prayer room, but yes, I know what you mean. At the end of the day, I have been very convicted. There's only so much that I can do. I can't change the Pope. I can't change what's going on in the Vatican. But what we can do, and if we are believers, we can pray. Pray the rosary especially. Pray to Our Lady. Pray, devote yourself to the Sacred Heart. Consecrate yourself to the Sacred Heart. I have that here on my prayers. That's what we can do. Pray to St. Michael the Archangel. Hello, St. Salty Traveling Sea. Terminal compassion. Yeah, that's it as well. Remember, the rosary was what defeated them at Lepanto. So we need to devote ourselves. And also what is in the movie, I forget the way the exact quote goes in the book because I've seen the movie too many times. When Gandalf says, all we can do is do what we can or what is given to us with the time that is given to us. He was like, I wish the ring had never come to me. So say all people who live to see such times. So what are you called to do at this time? I know who I am. And I can tell you one thing, I can't do a thing humanly against this. But I can pray and I can be faithful and I can influence those around me. Cardinal Burke, he told me personally, he goes, didn't you tell me when you introduced yourself that you were a music teacher? And it's like, yes, and you teach. And I said, I teach little children, I teach elementary music. And he goes, that's what you're supposed to do. And he said, and you teach them the beauty of great music. He said, that's what you're supposed to do. He said, we have lawyers, we have this. We were talking a little bit in context of what was going on with the president from 2008. He says, that's what you're called to do. Because if you teach children to recognize beauty, that it's like they will see then the counterfeit. They will see the ugly, and they will be repulsed by it. I just try to make people happy, says Man Cave Inc. That's all I can do. Yes, salty traveling sea. It's not actual compassion. It's part of the great replacement agenda. Yes, it will exactly. It's all connected. It's definitely all connected. It's been planned, and who knows? It might have been planned as long as I live. And who knows what we didn't know? Mom and I were talking about this. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have connections with other people. Like if you wanted to write a letter to the editor, I used to do that. You wrote a letter, you mailed it, and maybe it was published. We had even the 24-hour news cycle when that came. We had no way of fact checking. How long were the lies being told? And this is why everything that's going on in the chat here, this is why we need St. Thomas More as a guide, even though it looks like it's just for the papacy. All right, so let's look at the trial and execution of St. Thomas More, an account in a Paris newspaper. And this is why sometimes people will say he said, I'm the king's good servant and God's first. It could be a bit of both. There were two different accounts. Both of them, though, work. So here we go. And this is from a Thomas More source book by George Wegemer. I do have this, and I'm going to be reading from that in a bit. This is a very good work, everything you need to know about St. Thomas More. So, on July 1st, 1535, Master Thomas More, Chancellor of England, though at this time he was not the Chancellor of England, he had resigned. He resigned the day after the bishops broke away from Rome. Was brought before the judges, and the accusations against him read in his presence. The Chancellor and the Duke of Norfolk turned to him and said, You, Master More, have gravely erred against the king. Nevertheless, we hope by his clemency that if you repent and correct your obstinate opinion in which you have so rashly persevered, you will receive pardon. He replied, St. Thomas More replied, My lords, I thank you very heartily for your goodwill. I pray God preserve me in my just opinion even to death. As to the accusation against me, I fear words, memory, and judgment would fail me to reply to such a length of articles, especially considering my present imprisonment in great infirmity. A chair was then ordered to be placed for him as he proceeded as follows. Yes, he had been in prison for more than a year and in very damp conditions. In the situation of St. John Fisher, who is much older and more infirm, it was pretty bad. I mean, you don't want to end up in the Tower of London, well, in any time. Yeah, been in motion since the late 1800s, to be honest. It's a communist playbook from back in the 50s, and agreed. Yes, this is why the Leo the 13th's Rerum Novarum is so important to have a look at. It was talking about communism, etc. Yes, indeed. As to the first article, charging me with having always maliciously opposed the king's second marriage, I will only answer that what I have said has been according to my conscience. I mean, and let's just think about this. Who cares if you don't like someone's second marriage? I can tell you a lot of second marriages. I can tell you a lot of first marriages I have a problem with. I will only answer that what I have said has been according to my conscience. Yeah, who cares? I mean, because of what was going on, that's why it was considered treason. I mean, it's just a mess, but he's a lawyer and he knows what he's talking about here. I never wished to conceal the truth. And if I had, I should have been a traitor. For this error, if error it should be called, I have been condemned to perpetual imprisonment, which I have already suffered for 15 months, and my goods confiscated. He's saying, yeah, man, I've been punished enough. For this reason, I will only reply to the principal charge against me, that I have incurred the penalty of the statute made in the last Parliament since I was in prison, by refusing the king his title of Supreme Head of the Church, in proof of which you allege my reply to the Secretary and Council that I was dead to the world. I did not care to think of such things, but only of the passion of Christ. I reply that your statute cannot condemn me to death for such silence, for neither your statute nor any laws in the world punish people except for words and deed, surely not for keeping silence. Yeah. So they came after him for his silence. There's a line in A Man for All Seasons. I don't know if it's based on a real quote, where they say this silence had screamed throughout all of Europe, because everyone was following this and everyone knew this. He was very popular. He was the author of Utopia. Very fascinating work. Remember, utopia means no place. Utopia means no place. And what did he say? Oh, because of reasons. Have you been following what's been going on in the current Church of England? I just have said to myself over and over again, Thomas More was right, wasn't he? The king being the supreme head of the Church of England was a mistake. It was a mistake then, and it's a mistake now. Speaking of schism, I think that is a schism. I think that's schism. He ended up getting excommunicated, obviously. Obviously, the king did. Yeah, refusing to the king his title of supreme head of the church. Yeah, you had to swear to it. If someone swore to me today, I wouldn't. But keeping silence, because he wanted to keep his head, he just didn't say anything. And he quoted the Latin thing. I don't think in this article they talk about it. To this, the king's proctor replied that such silence was a certain proof of malice intended against the statute, especially as every faithful subject, on being questioned about the statute, was obliged to answer categorically that the statute was good and wholesome. Surely, replied More, if what the common law says is true, that he who is silent seems to consent, my silence should rather be taken as approval than contempt of your statute. Yeah, that silence gives consent. So he's saying, if you want to play this game, you all should just say that my silence was saying yes. You say that all good subjects are obliged to reply, but I say that the faithful subject is more bound to his conscience and his soul than anything else in the world. Okay, let's look at that. The faithful subject is more bound to his conscience and his soul than to anything else in the world. You come after the conscience, bad idea. I would say, same thing with my conscience. I say, this is according to my conscience. I cannot do this. This is against my conscience. And the state cannot compel the conscience, or cannot morally do so. The faithful subject is more bound to his conscience and his soul than to anything else in the world, provided his conscience, like mine, does not raise scandal or sedition. And I assure you that I have never discovered what is in my conscience to any person living. Yeah, he didn't say it. He didn't say it. He had a family to think about, too. As to the second article, that I've conspired against the statute by writing 8 letters to the Bishop of Rochester, advising him to disobey it. I could wish these letters had been read in public, but as you say the bishop has burnt them, I will tell you the substance of them. Yeah, the Bishop of Rochester, that is St. John Fisher. Some were about private matters connected with our old friendship. Another was a reply to one of his asking how I had answered in the tower to the first examination about the statute. I said that I informed my conscience, and so he ought to do the same. I swear that this was the tenor of the letters, for which I cannot be condemned by your statute. And when a Catholic swears, their soul is on the line. So St. Thomas More, by saying, I swear, he's doing that in fear of his immortal soul. Touching the third article, that when I was examined by the council, I answered that your statute was like a 2-edged sword, for he who approved it would ruin his soul, and he who contradicted it, his body. And that the Bishop of Rochester answered similarly, showing that we were Confederates. I replied that I only answered thus conditionally, that if the statute cut both ways like a two-edged sword, how could a man behave so as not to incur either danger? Yeah. So if you're going to lose his soul or you're going to lose your body. In his case, he chose his soul. I do not know how the bishop replied, but if he answered like me, it must have been from the agreement between us in opinion, but not because we had ever arranged it between us. Yeah, they were just of same mind. Be assured, I never did or said anything maliciously against the statute, but it may be that this has been maliciously reported to the king. Yeah, he's very careful here. He doesn't ever say anything really against the king, personally. Then they ordered an usher to summon 12 men according to the custom of the 20 country, and these articles were given to them that they might judge whether Moore had maliciously contravened the statute. After a quarter of an hour's absence, they declared him guilty of death, and sentence was pronounced by the chancellor. I'm not going to try to say that in Latin. Moore then spoke as followed, and this is very famous. We've talked about this before, but we're going to talk about it again. Since I am condemned, and God knows how, I wish to speak freely of your statute for the discharge of my conscience. So he's giving up his silence here. It's like, well, since I'm dead anyways, here we go. For the 7 years that I have studied the matter, dude's been studying this for 7 years, I have not read in any approved doctor of the church that a temporal lord could or ought to be head of the spirituality. Let me read that one more time. A temporal lord, another cannot be. A temporal lord cannot, could, or ought to be head of the spirituality. No temporal leader is head of the church. Whether it was the king back then or a president today. And this, again, is part of the American spirit, if you will. No state church, no temporal lord is in charge of the church. I remember under the president from 2008, he was like, well, what I said is reasonable for you all. And it's like, doesn't matter. Actually, it wasn't reasonable. But you're the president of the United States. You're not the bishop of Rome. You're not Cardinal Dolan. If the bishop said, okay, this is reasonable, that's one thing. Even if your local bishop did, even if he could be wrong or right. But the president, a mayor, Congress, no one is head of spirituality of the church, and definitely not the king. The chancellor, interrupting, said, what more? You wish to be considered wiser and of better conscience than all the bishops and nobles of the realm? Because he's saying, hey, all the bishops caved. To this Moore replied, my lord, for one bishop of your opinion, I have 100 saints of mine. For each one. And for one parliament of yours, and God knows of what kind, I have all the general councils for 1,000 years. And for one kingdom, I have France and all the kingdoms of Christendom. Yeah, it's like, y'all ain't so special. Norfolk told him that now his malice was clear. Moore replied, what I say is necessary for discharge of my conscience and satisfaction of my soul. And to this I call God to witness, the soul searcher of human hearts. I say further that your statute is ill-made, because you have sworn never to do anything against the church. He talks about, are we going to get there? Yeah, it's in the King's Coronation Oath, and it is also in the Magna Carta. He talks about that in another account of it, which goes into more detail. This, remember, is an article that appeared in France. And this I call God to it. Okay. What I say is necessary for the discharge of my conscience and satisfaction of my soul, and to this I call God to witness, the soul searcher of human hearts. That God is the only one who controls the human heart. I say further, that your statute is ill-made because you have sworn never to do anything against the church, which through all Christendom is one and undivided, and you have no authority without the common consent of all Christians to make a law or act of parliament or council against the union of Christendom. Yeah. Parliament, Congress, anybody. I know well that the reason why you have condemned me is because I have never been willing to consent to the king's second marriage. But I hope in the divine goodness and mercy that as St. Paul and St. Stephen, whom he persecuted, are now friends in paradise, so we, though differing in this world, shall be united in perfect charity in the other. So he's saying, I don't have malice. We disagree here, but I hope that we will be united in heaven. I pray God to protect the king and give him good counsel. On his way to the tower, one of his daughters, named Margaret, pushed through the archers and guards and held him in her embrace some time without being able to speak. Afterwards, More, asking leave of the archers, bade her have patience, for it was God's will, and she had long known the secret of his heart. Yeah, they were very close. He adored Margaret, his first child, I think is an eldest daughter. After going 10 or 12 steps, she returned and embraced him again, to which he said nothing, except to bid her pray to God for his soul, and this without tears or change of color. Yeah, so that's pretty dramatic that his daughter did that. The Tudors is the only one I know that dramatized this in one of their versions. Okay. Now, it was it 4 days later that he was 4 or 5 days later that he was to be executed. He was able to see his wife in person in the cell, in the tower, I believe, to say goodbye. We don't really have an account of what was said or not said. I mean, one can imagine what a husband and wife will say to each other at such a time. But he did write a letter to his daughter, to Margaret. Says here the 5th of July. So this is the last day of his life. He wrote a letter to his daughter, Mistress Roper, and sent it to her. He wrote it, what they say, in coal. And this is the last thing that he wrote. And he said, Our Lord bless you, good daughter, and your good husband, and your little boy, and all yours, and all my children, and all my godchildren and all my friends. Recommend me when you may to my good daughter Cecily, whom I beseech our Lord to comfort, and I send her my blessing to all her children, and pray her to pray for me. I send her a handkerchief, and God comfort my good son, her husband. My good daughter don't have the picture and parchment that you delivered me from my lady corner. So these are just, he's sending like different things and commending them. And show her heartily, I pray her that you may send it in my name to her again as a token from me and to pray for me. He keeps saying, please pray for me. And he says, be good to each other, be good to her. And I pray you be good to the other as you may in her affliction, and my good daughter, Joan Allen, to give her, I pray you, some kind answer. And I pray you to be good to each other. They keep saying, I pray you to be good to each other. I cumber you, good Margaret, much, but I would be sorry if it should be any longer than tomorrow. For it is St. Thomas Eve, and it's of St. Peter, and therefore tomorrow long I to go to God. It were a day very meet and convenient to me. Yeah, he goes on St. Thomas. I never liked your manner toward me better than when you kissed me last. That's what we just were talking about. For I love when daughterly love and dear charity hath not leisure to look to worldly courtesy. Farewell, my dear child, and pray for me, and I shall for you and all your friends, that we may merrily meet in heaven. So, And then I pray you, at time convenient, recommend me to my good son, John Moore. I liked well his natural fashion. Our Lord bless him and his good wife, my loving daughter, to whom I pray him be good, and he hath great cause. And that if the land of mine come to his hand, he break not my will concerning his sister Dawn's. And our Lord bless Thomas and Austin and all that they shall have. Yeah, because Thomas More, I guess, John Moore would be his heir. But he lost a lot of his property. Personally, I don't know how that worked out after his death, but we shall see. Maybe I'll look up more detail one day. On his way to the tower, one of his daughters, named Margaret. Oh, wait, we already said that. Okay. On the Tuesday following, he was beheaded in the open space in front of the tower. A little before his death, he asked those present to pray to God for him, and he would do the same for them in the other world. He then besought them earnestly to pray to God to give the king good counsel, protesting that he died his good servant and God's first. So that's where we get the "and God's first." This is a translation. That particular interpretation works well for that. How do I say this? That interpretation works well because of what he had said, the king had said to Thomas More. When he'd said, I pray you look to God first and then to me. So this would be an interesting way of him kind of not twisting the words, but using them in a very interesting way. Let me see. And then another account of the actual execution, which this was going to be in more detail, which talks about how he gets up on the scaffold. Let's see, verdict and sentence. I'm going to get here. All right. Let me bring this up. And it says, Thomas More remained a prisoner in the tower about a week after his sentence. On the 6th of July, early in the morning, his old friend, Sir Thomas Pope, came to him with a message from the king and council to acquaint him that his execution was appointed to be before 9 that morning. Whereupon Sir Thomas said, he thanked him heartily for his good news. I have been, says he, much obliged to his majesty for the benefits and honors he has most bountifully conferred upon me. Yet I am more bound to his grace, I do assure you, for confining me in this place where I have had convenient place and opportunity to put me in mind of my last end. So he's been able to prepare his soul. That's what he's saying. He's doing his last end. I am most of all bound to him that his majesty is pleased to rid me of the miseries of this wretched world. Yeah. Then Pope acquainted him. See, that's the problem when everyone's called Sir Thomas back then. It was the king's pleasure that he should not mean many words at the place of execution. Sir, said he, you do well to acquaint me with the king's pleasure, for I had otherwise designed to have made a speech to the people. But it matters not, and I am ready to conform myself to his highness's pleasure. So I guess he had speech. He was good. Who knows how long, but the king wasn't going to let him do that. It's like, okay, fine. Thanks for letting me know. And I beseech you, sir, you would become a suitor to his majesty that my daughter Margaret may attend my funeral. To which Pope replied that the king was willing his wives and children and other friends should be present. Oh, okay. Sir Thomas Pope, being about to take his leave, could not restrain from tears. Yeah, people liked him. Whereupon Sir Thomas More said, let not your spirits be cast down, for I hope we shall see one another in a better place, where we shall be free to live and love in eternal bliss. And to divert Pope's grief, he took up his urinal and shook it, saying merrily, I see no danger, but that this man may live longer if the king pleases. I guess I would like to be in decent spirits if that's what was going to be happening with me. About 9, he was brought out of the tower. His beard was long, his face pale and thin, and carrying a red cross in his hand, he often lifted up his eyes to heaven. A woman meeting him with a cup of wine, he refused it, saying, Christ at his passion drank no wine, but gall and vinegar. Another woman came crying and demanded some papers she said she had left in his hands, really, when he was Lord Chancellor, to whom he said, Good woman, have patience. But for an hour, and the king will rid me of the care I have for those papers and everything else. My goodness. Another woman followed him, crying. He had done her much wrong when he was Lord Chancellor, to whom he said, I very well remember the cause, and as I were to decide it now, I should make the same decree. Wow. Come on, people. Really? The dude's about to be executed. When he came to the scaffold, it seemed ready to fall, whereupon he said merrily to the lieutenant, Pray, sir, see me safe up. As to my coming down, let me shift for myself. Yeah, that's the famous line. He cracked that joke. Being about to speak to the people, he was interrupted by the sheriff, and thereupon he only desired the people to pray for him and bear witness. He only desired the people to pray for him and bear witness he died in the faith of the Catholic Church, a faithful servant both to God and the king. Then kneeling, he repeated the Miserere psalm with much devotion. Yeah, that's a penitential psalm. And rising up to the executioner, asked him forgiveness. He kissed him and said, Pick up thy spirits, man, and be not afraid to do thine office. My neck is very short. Take heed, therefore, thou strike not awry, for having thine honesty. Laying his head upon the block, he bid the executioner stay till he had put his beard aside, for that had committed no treason. Thus he suffered with much cheerfulness. His head was taken off with one blow, and was placed upon London Bridge, where, having continued for some months, and being about to be thrown into the Thames to make room for others, his daughter Margaret brought it in enclosed it in a leaden box, and kept it for a relic. And there we go. The last days of St. Thomas More. Definitely someone that we can look to. If you haven't read Utopia, I would definitely recommend it. And you'll know that there's something very sacred about your soul, and no one can take your soul away from you. No one can or should take your conscience away from you. And that is the one thing that you can protect, that you have control over. So you need to nourish your conscience. You need to examine your conscience. You need to form your conscience. You need to train your soul as some train the body. And then nothing can harm you. Of course, some people can say, well, looks like it harmed Thomas More. Indeed. But who won in the end? As a believer, well, we believe he's a saint. But even humanly hasn't he proved to be right? So we can look to him. Maybe the people in England can look to him. Maybe the people in the Church of England can see. And perhaps join in with the ordinariate. The ordinariate in England, they have one here in America where you can worship according to the liturgy and customs of the Church of England. You will find a few changes, obviously, particularly with the Roman canon, to make sure that certain wording is in accord with the Mass, but you don't have to give it up. You don't have to give up the trappings and the attachments that you currently have if you want to join with the ordinariate. I would highly recommend it if that's where you feel you need to go. So it's there for you. And I've got a lot to say about Pope Francis, but he actually was really cool as far as that's concerned. He was very generous. You could probably Google it and figure it out, some of what he did, but he really stood up for the ordinariate. So good for him. And it was St. John Paul II who initially allowed it, and then Benedict codified it. So the church in England is still there. And we must pray. And we must pray for our bishops. Because remember, every single bishop was a betrayer in this situation. We need to pray for them. And when a bishop or a priest is doing something right, or a nun for that matter, a sister, a friar, a monk, let them know. I mean, sometimes they are so discouraged, they only hear when they're doing something wrong. Maybe let them know when they do something right and support them. They're fighting the good fight, and also for the laity as well. Maybe in my small way, I'm giving some encouragement here. I don't know. Or just pointing people in the right direction. It's difficult. It's difficult to live in this world and feel like you're doing the right thing. The right thing is almost never rewarded except in your heart and in your conscience and in your personal peace. And peace of soul, I think, is the most important thing to have. We cannot control anything except what is beyond our own sphere. To apply Voltaire, the Candide, tend your garden. Peterson says, make up your bed, clean your room. That's a place to start. That's where you can start. And if you have trouble with it, and I do, I actually bought activity dice. So I have to roll the dice and do what it tells me to do. Do what you need to do. You can create your own dice to do it if you have trouble. Look to your own community. But never let anyone take away your soul. Nothing is worth your soul. Nothing is worth your peace. One of the prayers that St. Thomas More wrote in the tower, give me the grace, good Lord, to set the world at naught, to cast the mind firmly upon you, and not to hang upon the words of men's mouths. Think about that. Not to hang upon the words of men's mouths. To be content to be solitary, utterly to lay off the world, and rid my mind of all its business. Gladly to think of the last things. My memory is going here. I had this mostly memorized. Gladly to bear my purgatory here. To pray for pardon before the judge comes. To consider my worst enemy my best of friends. For the brethren of Joseph could never have done him so much good with their love and favor as they did with their malice. And one of his last ones was to have mercy on so-and-so and look at their faults and mine together and make us saved souls together. I have both of those in my pray list. And that's what saints do for us. They do. They help us, they guide us, and they are very wise. That's why I looked at Thomas More both as a scholar of social studies, scholar of history, and also for how to be a lay person in this world. We are having more lay saints, but, for a while, usually a lot of them were not. They were religious saints, monks, nuns, priests, friars, sisters. Teach us how to live in the world. If you are married with children, I think that he's a good example, though maybe a little extreme in some things. Like he used to stay up all night and pray and wear a hair shirt. Maybe not that. Maybe not that at all. But yeah. Now currently, I am rereading the Little Flowers work. I've needed her in my life right now. She has great things to say as well. I have my song for today that I have under my videos under the Saint playlist and also under videos. So she's a good gal. Why would a Carmelite nun, why would I relate to one? Well, for some reason, she's one of the saints I relate to the most. So she's good times. Alrighty. Well, I've got to go. Got things going on here. I think I said on my ex, but I did end up losing my cat. I think I said previously how my cat wasn't doing very well and I was worried about him. So yes, he is gone and I know he's a cat, but he was my cat and it's been very difficult for me. So if you'd pray for me there, I would be very, very grateful. I'm getting over it slowly. And again, I know it's a cat, but, you know, when you're used to waking up, he was 16, nearly 17, and every morning he'd be right there in bed with me, usually waking me up or hitting me in the head with his paw or knocking things around trying to get me out of bed to feed him. But that's the way it was. Sitting in my lap, like, he would right now be sitting in my lap, messing with my microphone, probably at least once hitting the keyboard. Yeah, but he's gone now. And I don't know if I'm gonna get another cat. There's reasons, but of course, it's a good idea to wait. It's a good idea to wait. I don't wanna get any pet again for a while, but I miss him. So pray for me for my comfort. Well, and with the stressful other things that are going on, he was my live teddy bear. Pets are good for you. Luckily, I'm able to borrow my sister's pets, so I'm not completely petless. So there we go. Stay tuned. I promise you I will get to St. John Fisher. The reason I didn't was because I was so upset about my cat. I wasn't doing anything. I'm going to hope to do more content. If you would help me with the watch hours, I would definitely appreciate that too. And stay tuned on my other channel where I will probably be covering some of the World Cup. I will be covering movies. The Revenant, I finally did watch it, so I'll be covering that with Steve. More Mystery Night, I want to get into that, and good literature, good books, good movies. Because also feed your entertainment well. Don't doom scroll. Don't fall for rage bait. Remember you're being manipulated. Don't let them. All right, so that's that. Thank you, Salty Traveling Sea. Thank you, The Man Cave Inc. Thank you, everyone that's been coming in and out. I've been seeing you. Have a great day and be certain to be the King's good servant, but God's first.